Thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you've all been doing well since we last got together and that you found some time for yourselves for rest and self-care. I will remind everyone to keep their videos and microphones turned off and that we are recording this video or this call for later viewing. I'm Colleen Bond and we've got a good session, I think, planned for you today, and I think you'll find some good valuable information. It has been a busy week for us here at BCEDA, and I want to spend just a few minutes going over some of the things that we've been working on.
I'm good. How are
so
you?
As always, Ashley has kept things up to date on the COVID-19 website and the live document that provides all of those links and additional resources to help you in your recovery efforts. And she also sends out the bulletins to you 3 times a week with lots of other information in those. The business restart plan template, we released that.
Oh, there could be a delay with that.
We released that.
I can call you back in about half an hour. I'm just on a webinar. Yeah, what's your direct number? Yeah.
Okay. All right, I've got everybody muted now, so let's continue on. So the restart template plan that we had sent out a few weeks ago, that does continue to be released by, updated as WorkSafe BC releases new information. And we've received some really good feedback on that document. And I've heard from some of you that your businesses are using it as a starting point. So we're happy about that. Earlier this week, Ashley would have emailed you a link to a survey for you to fill out. And this is a municipal restart survey, as we call it. And this is for us to collect information about the type of information and the resources that you need to keep moving forward now. BCEDA, we're looking at our existing resources, including the workshops that we offer, the webinars, and all of the other resource tools that we have. We really want to make sure that we're addressing your needs. The survey is very short. It really will only take you a few minutes to complete, I promise, but it will really help us develop the products that you're looking for. So thanks to those who have already completed the survey. We do have a few in, so that's been great. I also want to address these webinars here that we've been doing since April the 2nd. I really hope that over the past 2 months, we've provided information and resources that have been valuable and useful in your own community's recovery efforts. And now as things start to open up and you start to focus your efforts in a different way, we know that these webinars will be coming to an end, and we're currently reviewing that, and we'll keep you all informed. I do want to thank everyone who calls in each week or watches the recorded version. It's been a pleasure putting together the content for you, your community, and your businesses. And I've really appreciated the positive feedback we've received since we've started these webinars. As most of you know, we've developed a couple of COVID-19 specific surveys. So the first one was focused on that immediacy of the pandemic, while the second one was developed just as the province released their restart plan. So that second survey focused more on how businesses were going to reopen and to identify those types of challenges that were associated there. Just this morning, we released a third survey, and that one is focusing on businesses that have reopened and how that experience is going and what they may need. It's a short survey, only about a dozen questions, but should give you a good overall understanding of how your businesses are doing right now. This survey, like all the previous COVID-19 surveys, are available for free to all communities. And I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, and she's going to address how this survey is going to be used in partnership with Fortis BC.
Good afternoon. Thanks. So Fortis BC has again jumped in like they did during the wildfires to set up a hotline to support BC businesses. There's 2 different ways that businesses can use the hotline. They can call to complete the BC Restart survey that Colleen was just speaking about. The aggregate results will be shared with communities, and there's also an option for businesses to indicate whether they'd like to speak to a community contact. If they do indicate that, we will forward the survey to a economic development representative in the community. If you're not currently running a survey, we invite you to share this toll-free line and web form and start collecting data. Communities can also register for the BC Business Counts program, as Colleen mentioned, which offers free access to this data and the ability to run reports. The second purpose of the toll-free line is businesses can also call to register for the Support Local BC website. This site is for locally owned independent businesses to sell gift cards online. 100% of the value purchased goes to businesses. Love Northern BC and Northern Development are offering an extra incentive on the website when a shopper spends $25 or more on a Northern BC business. Love Northern BC will provide a one-time bonus $25 gift card to spend on the website at a Northern BC business of their choice. To date, the Support Local BC website has sold almost $40,000 in gift cards in over 1,100 businesses from 45 BC communities. Thanks so much to Fortis for establishing this hotline to support BC businesses. More information on both of these programs will be included in the post-call email today. Thanks, Colleen.
Well, thank you, Ashley. I know you've been working long and hard on getting this done, so it's been great work, and it's good to see that it's happening now. I want to just remind everyone that the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance for small business started taking applications on May the 25th. So that was just this past Monday. And this is the program that provides property owners with a rent reduction of at least 75% for the months of April and May. So those 2 months will be retroactive, and there's also relief for the month of June. The program will cover 50% of the rent, with the tenant paying up to 25% and the property owner forgiving at least 25%. So most of you likely know that Small Business BC has the toll-free line that provides information on all the various programs that are available. And now the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has a business resilience service. So this is their toll-free number, and it's going to connect you with experienced business advisors from across Canada. So they're going to provide guidance on which government relief programs will be most appropriate to support small to medium-sized businesses. The service is run through the Chamber's Business Resilience Network, and they've collaborated with EY, and they have the support from the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada, as well as Imagine Canada. So it's provided for a 4-week period. They started on May the 25th. It's available 7 days a week from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., and that's our local BC time. And another resource for your businesses is through Innovation Canada. So this resource is designed to also help individuals as well as businesses. And the website is set up to have businesses and individuals navigate all of those various programs that are available, and helps them quickly find the federal, provincial, or territorial programs that they may qualify for. All the user has to do is go onto the website and answer a few simple questions. We got a lot of good feedback from a webinar we held a few weeks ago, and that was the one where Steve Pedigo outlined some of the steps necessary for recovery, sort of a little mini action plan. So he's shared a new toolkit with us, and it focuses on restarting tourism marketing. It's a destination marketing and management toolkit, and it's going to prepare you to or help you to prepare your positioning, your marketing, messaging, communications to restart tourism in your community and your region. It will walk you through the pre-recovery, early recovery, and late recovery action steps, and there's some included suggested strategies in it as well. I think it could be a good resource for those communities, that are starting to look at or have already started to look at a plan to restart their tourism economy. So before quickly I jump over to the speakers, I do want to make note of one of the slides that I never seem to get time for, but that's the slide that provides examples of what other communities are doing. And hopefully you do check these examples out after the call, but in case you don't, today I do want to draw your attention to something that's being done in Victoria. So they created a toolkit to help their businesses reopen. And why I want to draw your attention to it is because it's really simple, but it's really effective and helpful to their local businesses. So as part of the toolkit, they've created 3 files that businesses can use. All they do is go online and download these 3 files. One is an occupancy sign. It clearly is going to tell the public the number of people that are allowed into the business. The second file is a checklist for prevention. Again, clearly telling the public not to enter if they're experiencing any specific symptoms as set out by the public health. And the third file provides the design for floor stickers that businesses can then take to their local printers. So these are the ones that we're all really starting to get familiar with, that mark out the social distancing measures that we need to adhere to when we're shopping. What I like so much about this is the work is already done for the business. So your businesses, you likely know, right, they're going to be really busy right now. They're busy enough. And the more that you can provide them in a turnkey format will be really helpful to them. So if you've got a moment, I encourage you to check out what Victoria has done and see how you may be able to adapt it for your own community. One suggestion I would have is maybe you can enable your businesses to add their own logos to the file. So let's move on to the speakers. So please use the chat box to ask your questions to the group or individually to myself or Ashley. I will hold off on answering the questions until after all of the presentations so we can give an opportunity for all of our speakers to answer. Our focus today is on the aviation industry, airports, and air travel. So first up, we have Dave Frank, and Dave is the Executive Director of the BC Aviation Council, and he's got a real love for the people in aviation and aerospace. He's been with the council since 2017 and has experience in marketing and communication, as well as being a senior executive with a regional freight and air ambulance operation. He founded Canada's first multimodal foreign trade zone, along with an international consulting firm focused on transportation and economic development. So he's very active, obviously, in the aviation industry and is working on how to reduce and recover from the effects being felt with the pandemic. So Dave, if you are unmuted, which you can do yourself, or I can do it, please go ahead and just let me know when you need the slides moved ahead, and I'll do that for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Colleen. Really appreciate this opportunity. Unfortunately, my story today is a tragedy. It's a tale of woe. It's actually close to Shakespearean tragedy, what is happening in our aviation sector. So we titled this COVID-19 and BC's aviation sector, a Shakespearean tragedy. And if you could hit the next slide, Colleen. Like all good tragedies, we have a plot. First is, who is the BC Aviation Council? After all, if they don't have any credentials, why are you listening to me? Second is the importance of aviation and aerospace. Again, if it's not important, why are we discussing it today? Also, we have how airports and travel will be changed and reshaped, which is the title of today's webinar. Then we go into the 3 stages that the industry is going through, most industries are going through. The current situation, which is survival. There are some green shoots, which is moving towards stabilization. And we have an ask of our governments. We're going to need help to recover from this situation. Next. Who is the BCAC? We're the industry group for aviation and aerospace in the province. We have 340 eclectic members, are a registered charity. We're member driven and funded. We've been in existence for 82 years, but we haven't seen anything like what COVID has done to our industry during that period of time. Our vision is to have an industry that is visible, connected, and thriving. That third issue is what we're really challenged with today. And what we mostly do is we communicate, facilitate, and amplify our industry's voice during this COVID crisis. We're deeply embedded in the industry right across the country, and we work with 16 different national and regional associations on the COVID issue. Next. These are some of those regional and national associations. We fondly refer to this as the alphabet soup gang, but for us to amplify our voice, it's critically important that we work in conjunction with everyone else and do a common message to governments and the industry as a whole. The importance of aviation and aerospace. Well, last year, which seems like 3 years ago, the province's aviation and aerospace industries directly employed over 44,000 professionals and contributed 12.6 billion to Canada's gross domestic product. That's billion with a B. So on the macro level, this is an extremely vital sector. But beyond that, aviation is the most powerful social economic infrastructure a community has. It is the way that your general aviation tourism gets into your community. Your high value tourism flies into your community. Your high value goods move in and out via aviation networks. Your investors come in, buy aircraft. Your location and how you fit into the world is defined by your air services. So that is one of the reasons that we really argue that aviation is one of the essential keystones that we have to rebuild quickly in order to support the future economic and social health of our communities throughout British Columbia. Colleen? How airports and travel will be changed and reshaped. I have absolutely no idea. There are a lot of people smarter than me that are taking fairly intelligent speculations at what this industry will look like. But what I do know is change it will. And the reason for that is because the industry has been absolutely decimated. It's been shaken below its foundation. Next slide. Over 93% of all aviation business activity in the province is gone and has been gone for 2 months. In people terms, that means 41,000 people over that 2-month period of time have been directly impacted. And if this situation continued for a year, $11.5 billion in gross domestic product would go poof. To date, over this 2.5-month period, about $2.5 to $3 billion worth of product has disappeared from our economy. In addition to that, and on a more micro and personal level, several remote and Indigenous communities have lost all their scheduled air services. Prince Rupert, Bella Bella, Bella Coola, Haida Gwaii, and others. This puts extreme strain on those communities. Next. However, it's not all doom and gloom. There are some green shoots. Aviation is pretty tough to kill. It's got a real get it done attitude. There is still a skeletal scheduled network in British Columbia connecting its communities to Canada. However, flights are measured per week now, not by the day. Carriers are starting to put a toe back in the water, especially in June. The Air Canadas, the Pacific Coastals, the Harbour Airs, and others are all relaunching parts of their schedules. There are increased cargo systems because of the movement of PPEs and other essential cargoes into communities. And there's been small charter work into those remote communities to keep their lifeline alive. Our Medivac services are second to none and have continued their exceptional work. We are ready for the forest fire season, and the flight schools are back in the air, unlike Ontario and Quebec where they are still closed. And that's a real tribute to Dr. Henry and the provincial government and its approach to containing this virus. Next. So what do we need to recover quickly and survive in the short term? First of all, a shout out to Transport Canada. They have been extremely responsive, more responsive than anyone ever thought they could be to the number of exceptions and new safety regulations that were required under COVID. So good on them. Let's keep it up. From the federal government, there are 5 key asks. Provide low barrier forgivable business loans and grants to essential small and regional air operators. to cover such costs as NAV Canada charges, airport charges, aviation fuel excise taxes, rent, ground handling fees, etc. This industry is charged and taxed and feed to death. And if we have decided that these are essential services, it's critical that we make sure that these essential services survive this period. We need to ensure that all airports, irrespective of their ownership model, are eligible for all programs launched to combat COVID, especially the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy Program and the rent subsidy programs. This is part of the airport's survival. Why this is critically important in British Columbia is our Aviation Council has 45 members. 3/4 of them are belong to a municipality. Being part of a municipality, those airports are not eligible for federal programs. So they are right now between a rock and a hard place. That is something that needs to change, or else some very dramatic changes may be happening to our airport structure throughout the province. We need the flexibility to adjust tight implementation deadlines and dedicated federal funding to help airports meet new regulatory requirements. These mostly are very good and well-meaning regulations to increase accessibility in airports and to increase the safety of our runway systems. However, nobody has any cash to put these things in. These need to be delayed until the industry recovers. We need an increase in the Airport Capital Assistance Program, funding up to $95 million and relax the program's guidelines. What this program does is it supports the enhancement of the smaller airports throughout the country. And it's currently underfunded, but if we can get these projects going forward, it's part of the solution to recovery. Finally, increase funding for Destination Canada to promote travel domestically, as well as to stimulate international tourism to Canada once travel rebounds. This again is critical to the recovery of our industry. Tourism and aviation need to work hand in hand going forward. Next. From our provincial government, it's a smaller list because we're a federally regulated industry. We need to double the funding for the BC Air Access Program. That is the British Columbia equivalent of the ACAP program of the feds. It supports the enhancements of the small airports. This program needs to be used in 2020, not for capital projects, but to support airport operating costs to ensure that the airports survive this year. Then in 2021, go back to capital projects throughout the province, supporting the development of our airport infrastructure. Increasing funding for Destination Canada, we need to increase funding for Destination BC so that we have the keys to our own destination in our hands to help promote rebuilding the domestic travel and eventually international tourism throughout British Columbia. A lot of tourism is not just about Vancouver anymore. There's Indigenous tourism, there's Great Circle tourism, there's smaller community tourism. These all rely on air transportation networks throughout the region to be viable. And finally, to help our flight training schools, there are 42 of them throughout the province, from Vanderhoof to 4 in Langley. We need to increase the amount of student aid available for domestic students to reflect the approximately $85,000 cost of obtaining a commercial pilot license. Yes, you heard that right. These people are somehow finding $85,000 minus $5,000 in student aid to get their commercial pilot's license. This is basically the model in Alberta, and this would help the recovery of our flight training schools, which is one of our major higher education exporters and also institutions of higher learning throughout British Columbia. Next. And for our municipalities, and this is for the people on this webinar especially, we need mayors to draft letters of support to the federal and provincial governments, articulating the themes that I've outlined here, especially if they're an airport community. We need those city councils to support their local airport through this very difficult time. And of course, the BC Aviation Council can help facilitate those activities. Next. I'd like to leave this visual with you. This is the next generation coming up in aviation and aerospace. And we have to fight this virus and make sure that it doesn't cost us a generation of our youth to avoid and not find their careers and their educational path through aviation and aerospace. This is as much about the future as it is about today. And the last slide, Colleen, is just a thank you, fly safe, and be well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was some eye-opening numbers there for sure. So shall we keep with the Shakespearean play here? Next up we have Chad and Jeff. And Chad is the manager, Airport Business Development and Community Relations at the Kelowna International Airport. And Jeff is the airport's Senior Manager, Airport Development. So they both are bringing together a vast amount of aviation knowledge and experience to us today. Kelowna's airport is the largest municipal-owned airport in Canada, and the city has operated it since 1946. It's also the 10th busiest airport in Canada, and although of course there's been a major decline in passengers, Chad will be and Jeff will be addressing how airports are adapting and will need to continue to adapt moving forward. So Chad and Jeff, if you want to unmute yourself, we will let you go.
Thanks, Colleen. Thanks for that introduction and getting the facts out there on our airport. I really appreciate it, and it's a privilege to be here today to talk in front of this group. So I really appreciate the invite. So we're going to run through today our Kelowna Airport air service recovery strategy that we've been working on right now, and it really illustrates the current situation that we're dealing with right now. Yes, in 2019, we moved over 2 million passengers, largest municipal government owned and operated airport in the national airport system, and the 10th busiest airport last year, and now it's all gone. So on to the next slide. Here's a snapshot of what we were looking at for passengers in the month of April 2020. We generally would do about 5,000 passengers a day. April 2020 was 5,706 for the whole month. So down a whopping 96.3% over the previous year. So passenger numbers down significantly. We used to use the tagline, YLW, Kelowna International Airport, over 70 flights a day. In April, we were using the tagline about 4 flights a day. We still had the benefit and the privilege to have some flights. WestJet was flying to Calgary twice a day and to Vancouver, and we had Air Canada graciously remaining servicing Vancouver to get passengers in and out of the Okanagan region. Next slide. So we've been working on and doing a lot of research, working with a number of organizations, doing work internally and externally on recovery scenarios. So we've looked and compiled this graph. There's 3 different recoveries that we can potentially be looking at: steady recovery, A, or protracted recovery, that's B, and then a double dip recovery with C. The most optimistic one, of course, is the green one. You can see start moving up ahead in traffic throughout the summer, but it doesn't reach the 2019 passenger levels until 2023. Similar with the protracted, it takes a little bit longer. It's fall really before we start to see traffic start to increase at the Kelowna Airport. But now we're looking at 2023, 2024 to get back to the 2019 passenger levels. And then we want to take into account in C, double dip recovery. in the event that COVID comes back with strength in the fall, we would see our service, of course, decline. And again, we're looking at with these 2B and C, it's really almost 2024 before we get back to those numbers. And the next slide, please. So I'll hand the rest of the presentation off to Jeff.
Hi, everybody. This slide's titled Global Companies and how they matter to the regional and local economies. There's a lot of data in here and there's a lot of big name companies. But, you know, the bottom piece also states where airlines, airports, and aerospace companies drive the world economy, but in turn, they affect you. They affect you in every community that we're in. The people that work for these companies live in your communities. Maybe not all of them, and maybe not to the effect of some communities, but you are affected in some way. And I mean, if you look, there's some big numbers in here, and I won't read it all, but I'll gloss over a few. If you look at Boeing, for example, Q1 of 2020, $1.7 billion loss, 16,000 jobs. Airbus, mostly out of Europe, but also in North America, 3,200 jobs, 80% down on their aircraft deliveries year on year. Airline bankruptcies, you know, Dave alluded to some of this, that the industry will change. And this is only the start of the industry changing. LATAM, for example, is one of the biggest airlines in the world, and it's filed for Chapter 11 protection. Thai, Avianca, you know, services the whole of South Central America. These are large organizations going to the wall. There's a slide for Air Canada that I'll let you read yourself, only because Serge is listening and I don't want to talk about him while he's listening. WestJet's in there with you know, a notification there in terms of parked aircraft. 135 out of their 181 aircraft fleet. When you look at that across the world, you're talking about 18,000 airplanes that last week were parked. That's an absolutely amazing number. You know, owners of those airplanes are mostly lessors or financial institutions, and those financial institutions own maybe 2,000 or 3,000 airplanes if they're really big, really big. So that's an indication of some of the large companies that are suffering severely here. And the last slide, the last portion of that piece shows you about cash burn. Delta's in there with $100 million US a day. That's just not sustainable. We have to get the industry back on its feet in order to have the airport system survive and allow local and regional economies to return to what they were, as well as global economies. Next slide, Colleen, please. So air service recovery, what does it look like? There's multiple factors in here. You know, you look at aircraft availability, and I'm sure Serge may talk a little bit to this too, but and Dave has mentioned it, that's going to change. There's aircraft parked, there's older aircraft that are not going to return, there's aircraft types that are going to be removed from service completely. But the key point in there is just because you had a wide body aircraft servicing your airport 3 months ago, doesn't mean to say that that same aircraft type is coming back. You know, those have to be available to the airlines. They have to have renegotiated all those leases with the lessors. They have to have them in the system. They have to have the crews to be able to operate them. And they have to, above all, have demand from the airports and the regions to be able to operate them in. That demand's driven down a little bit currently, because of people staying at home, almost all. And, you know, what does that look like? Do people continue to video conference? Do they travel for meetings anymore? Do they go visit friends and relatives? Is there a significant tourism uptick to come? I'm pretty sure there is. It's just, we don't know what that looks like. People are antsy to get out of their houses and go and do these things, but it has to be done safely. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. But, you know, in order for airlines like Air Canada and others to have the confidence to bring that service back, you have to look at the booking behavior. They have to see advanced bookings in the system before they're going to put capacity into any given airport. And that capacity is required then for the economic development. How do you get business passengers in and out? You know, if you don't have Dave also alluded to the direct and indirect jobs that this industry supports, and there's a whole host of indirect jobs that lots of people don't even conceive that are related to airlines and airport operations, and that all comes into your pile of economic development for whatever region or community you're related to. Airline mergers, acquisitions, and what's their current liquidity positions. I mean, these are changing by the day. There's certainly going to be less airlines. There's certainly going to be buyouts. There's certainly going to be mergers across the world, and we'll just have to wait and see what that looks like. But those talks are already happening. And then what is it like to go through an airport anymore? It's going to change. It's going to completely change. There's going to be a day when everything is completely autonomous. We're not there yet, but you will be able to pick up your phone, book a flight, and then the app takes over and takes you all the way through the process where you've been screened, your bag's been covered, it's been delivered at the other end, and you don't even know. You've not walked through a machine, you've not been touched by a person, you've not talked to a person. That's going to come, and this type of event is going to drive that. But it's not there yet. And all encompassing in that is the environmental piece. What does that look like? Airlines are looking for more efficient aircraft and types. Everybody has an eye on that environmental sustainability piece. Next slide, please, Kate. So this is an idea of our protracted recovery strategic framework. This is what we feel is, out of those three lines on the graph that Chad showed you, is where we see the most realistic recovery being, and that's in that middle line, that B line, that protracted recovery. And this is not our idea out there, Port. It's not just somebody's drawn this up as an idea. This is done with some of the major organizations in the industry, ICAO, IATA. We have significant modeling being done in the background that we are very trusting of. And I was on some conference calls this morning with operators and airports and airlines across the world, mostly European, North American, and Asian, but they all see this very similar piece. This is not coming back tomorrow, and it's not coming back in the shape that it was before. So what does that look like? The top line is basically a timeline. The second line is passenger numbers related to that timeline, and you can see it's summer 2021 at the end of the slide. We're still around the 53% mark, and you know, again on that conference call this morning, that is 64% of the people on that call thought that was a realistic or the most realistic recovery. So that's what the industry thinks. So what can we do? What can the airport do? We've got to provide you a safe travel environment. We've got to work with partners like you for demand generation, and I'll come back to that because that is absolutely key. We have to communicate that demand to the airline network planners. And as we go down the line, we need to develop those technologies that I was talking about in the beginning for safe, non-touch travel. We need to adjust our operations to suit the change in requirements, whether that's regulatory or driven by the customer. It doesn't matter. We're going to have to move to those. And then we've got to continue to communicate that demand. We've got to deploy those technologies as we move further into this, and then we've got to look at what our upcoming winter strategies and our upcoming summer strategies come, because if we let our foot off the gas, people will do different things. You know, it only takes 3 weeks to form a habit, and we've been in our houses now for closer to 3 months. So things have changed already, and habits have changed already. And again, we've got to continue that piece. So there's a lot of communication involved, there's a lot of partner work involved in here, and there's a lot of demand to be driven. So how can the economic development partners help that? So partnering with Kelowna Airport, with other airports, with airlines to support that demand. You've heard from Dave, and you'll hear from Serge, I'm sure, and you've heard from us. We don't have revenue. We're 96% down in our revenue, but we've still got to keep the lights on. We've still got to run the business. We've still got to do things that we have to do to meet our regulatory compliance. We still have to be open for business. So all our costs are still there. So we're burning cash also. We just happen to be in a better position at Kelowna Airport than most other airports in Canada, because we don't have a high debt load. We've managed to control our costs from very early on. And our next phase, as we're doing now, is talking to all the airlines to generate that requirement to come back. But you know, there's a long-standing piece of incentives for airports to offer airlines to start new routes. Well, the airports, realistically, they don't have that money to offer those incentives anymore. They don't have the revenue. So we need to drive that down to our partners. And it's going to be up to economic development agencies all the way down to individual businesses to drive that demand, because the shape of how routes are developed is changing. It used to be capacity driven. So airlines would like people to know that they were the majority shareholder in any given market, and that was enjoyed by airlines and customers and airports altogether. That's changed now. That the airlines will come back only when demand is there. So it's no longer capacity driven. And capacity means seats. So you could have 30 routes a day coming out of any given airport, but it doesn't mean to say that those seats were full on those airplanes. That means there was 30 airplanes with seats. What they want now, and what we have to produce now, is people to fill those seats. That's demand. And when demand is there, then the airlines will bring in the capacity. So it's flipped. There's a piece about messaging. Dave mentioned it also, and this is the other piece. It has to be consistent. It has to be consistent from major organizations in the industry, through the federal government, through the provincial governments, through the municipal and local governments, all the way down to local businesses. People need to know from end to end that they're safe. It's not just about being safe at the airport or being safe on the airplane. It's about being safe on the bus to the airport. It's about being safe in the car park. It's about being safe picking up a rental car. It's about being safe to go to the ski hill, or to go to the golf course, or to go to the restaurants. And that's where the vast majority of local and regional economic development association memberships are. And that's where it's important. They need to tell people that are booking a flight that it's safe to come to Kelowna and go to any given restaurant in the city and do that. And that's the same across Canada. So it's an end-to-end piece, and that's part of what the economic development partners can do, is to support that and support it collaboratively, because this is a medium to long-term initiative. It's not short-term recovery. So and I've been an economic developer, and I guess in some ways I still am, from our sister province across the border. And sometimes we get weighed down with smaller local issues. We've got to forget these today. We've got to look at the big picture, and we've got to drive demand into our regions and from our regions. And after that will come profitability for companies. But right now it's about quantity, not about quality. So what will the airlines do in looking for that? This is a clean sheet opportunity. They said they're going to design new networks. It's demand driven, it's not capacity driven. It's Short-term planning is the order of the day within any given airline now. You know, an airline used to look at a network planning system 4 months out plus a bit of shoulder time. Right now they're doing it month to month, but they're doing changes to that weekly and daily. And I'm pretty sure Serge will come, I don't want to take away anything he's going to say, but I'm pretty sure he's going to back that up and tell us that if the demand's not there on a daily basis or a weekly basis, they're going to move that capacity to somewhere else. So that's up to us to drive that demand so that the airlines have the ability to put the capacity in. And advanced bookings are key to that route availability. Airlines need to know that in the weeks and months coming, people are prepared to travel. And, you know, there's some responsibility on the airlines and the hotels and the other people in that value chain that can say, well, if I book my vacation or I book my travel and I'm not able to go because of the virus or because of some other factor, they need to know that they're going to get their money back, or in some form be able to get some compensation or travel at a further point in time. So there's confidence in there too. You know, the summer season is going to be depressed, undoubtedly. The winter season will be increased slightly, and then the further summer and winter seasons will look very different. As we get into the back end of 2020 and the start of 2021, they really, really, really need to see those advanced bookings. You know, that's the point that we're going to be looking more at trans-border and international capacity. My personal feeling is we're going to be a staycation nation for the next close to 2 years, if not more. So we're going to drive that demand from inside of Canada. And then at that point in time, we can start to look at how do we get trans-border and international capacity back into the system. Deploying technologies in there for safe travel is going to give people confidence to fly. The return of premium passenger revenues are going to start pick up. That brings a bit more profitability back into the system. And the airlines will begin to reinstate additional capacity as we go through this. Service offerings will improve when there's a bit more cash in the pocket to be able to do those types of things. But fleet management will be continued. The types of aircraft that are coming into your communities, the size, the amount of frequency is going to be monitored, as I said, on a daily, weekly basis. And if we don't provide that demand, then the capacity will be moved to another stronger market. Next slide, please. That's me and that's Chad. We're happy to talk about anything that we've said in this, either in this forum or in future forums. Our contact details are there, and we'll be hanging around for questions later. But as Dave said, this is not a happy story, but we all need to be in it together to make sure that we all come out of it together. Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you, both Chad and Jeff. That was some really great information, and I really appreciate you talking about the actions our community can take, our communities can take, and really, you know, starting to come from that economic development view. That was really, really helpful to our audience for sure. So now we've got Serge. So he is the Director, Government Relations, Local and Provincial with Air Canada. Serge has over 25 years of experience in government relations and communications. And before joining Air Canada, he worked with the Canadian Diabetes Association, Insurance Bureau of Canada, and was also Press Secretary and Special Assistant to the Minister of Labour, Minister of Transport, and a Member of Parliament in Ottawa. So I think we're all going to be very interested in your piece here and what's being planned from Air Canada's side of things, and looking at the regional connections that are so important to our community. So I hand it over to you. So as everybody else, just let me know when to move the slides.
Thank you all. Glad to be here today. It's been, I don't know, it's been a bit depressing. I hope I can I can put back a little bit of sunshine, but very, very little. You'll see in a moment. And I was looking at that picture and I said, like, oh my God, I don't know if it's the last few weeks, but I have way more gray hair now. So the photo you've seen. So the last few weeks have been indeed very challenging. I wanted to talk about, the impact it has had on Air Canada, our service internationally, but also in the province, because we've always been proud of the network that we've had here in BC, as well as not only the rest of Canada, but internationally. And before I move in terms of what we're doing looking forward, I always think that a slight look back to our story is always good to not only remind us of where we were not that long ago, but also of what we're doing to get back to that stage. It's going to take some time, but there's no doubt in our minds that we will be back in one way or another to a place where we can recall a lot of our colleagues. There was a slide there from Jeff about the number of people that are being laid off at Air Canada. It is true, it's going to be close to 20,000 employees. And sadly, it's a sad week at Air Canada because all of those announcements internally are happening this week. So there's a lot of goodbyes that can be done in face-to-face, sadly, but I'm losing a lot of my colleagues this week. Next slide, please. Some people probably are aware of that, but for us, it all started here in BC. Our very first flight in 1937 was a flight between Vancouver and Seattle, and Trans-Canada Airline at the time, and it was really what we do today. It was a mix of passengers and cargo, and the cargo was a few bags of mail. We've seen a lot in that history, a lot of ups and downs. We've had two near-death experience where one, we were under bankruptcy protection. Second time, we almost got there, but we've never seen anything like the current situation in terms of crisis and the impact it's had on our company. And next slide, please. So taking a quick look back at what, and we continue to be Canada's largest airline, although we're a skeleton of what we were. In 2019, we flew close to 52 million passengers. We flew to 220 destinations around the world. We had, on average, about 1,600 flights per day. As of last week, we of the 220 destinations around the world, 101 were outside of Canada and the United States. As of now, outside of the United States and Canada, we fly to 5 destinations. That just tells you how abruptly it came to a halt for us. Next slide, please. So looking at BC, and that's again, was before this week, really. Major employer in the province, close to 7,000 employees out of the 37,000 employees at Air Canada. As I mentioned, about 20,000 will be laid off. A lot of our employees were in the Metro Vancouver area, a significant contributor to the economy of this province, about $1.1 billion in expenditures, $2 billion impact on the GDP, and indirectly, we also support over 9,000 jobs, and our contribution to tourism, because we brought a lot of people to BC from the rest of Canada and the United States, and obviously from the rest of the world, was around $600 million added to our direct impact. Next slide, please. So when we look at the then and now, and the BC here doesn't mean before COVID. It's British British Columbia, but there's the before COVID, the after COVID. The company flew to 16 airports in the province, including our hub, YVR, Vancouver, close to 70 destinations. You see it here. You see a map of the province, all those airports that we were covering in the different regions of the province. Currently, and that's the May schedule, and I'll speak to the schedule in a moment in terms of how it's been changing on a daily basis almost. But currently, we're flying to 5 airports in the province, namely Terrace, Kelowna, Victoria, Nanaimo, and of course Vancouver. We do have a plan to restart the stations. As of today, we have the intention of returning to all of the communities. It's going to take some time. Rightly so, Jeff mentioned the demand is going to drive that. A lot of the flights to these 15 airports outside of Vancouver was driven by passengers from your communities that were connecting on our network to the rest of Canada, the US, or internationally. So as that network has been quite significantly cut back, it's going to take some time for that demand to come back. But you know, we're looking at June. We do intend, and it's a plan, and it's true. We're looking at demand, and for now it's the plan. But we have to put those flights back in the schedule to see the demand, and also there's a fairly significant process involved in terms of getting the aircraft back into service, crewing them, et cetera, et cetera. So we need at one point to put them back. We can't just, you know, turn it on overnight. But we're looking at returning to Prince Rupert in June, as well as Fort St. John, Prince George, June 1st. Kamloops should start back June 15th. We're looking and then at Sandspit, July. We had a conversation with the Haida Nation, a very good, frank conversation with them. Some of the regions are telling us we don't want to see people from outside the region. So obviously that's having an impact on demand, and we respect that. But we're not about to fly empty planes. You know, we've lost $1 billion in the first quarter of this year, and our burn rate right now of cash every single day is $22 million. That's $600 million a month. Our goal obviously is not to take that number to $30 million, but to take it to zero and return to be a profitable company. So next slide, please. So looking at, again, at our international network, I just thought that the, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That was March, before the pandemic hit us hard. That was our international network above. And when you look at April, as I said, it's a very small part of the network. We've seen, though, I mean, in all of these, you know, series of bad news that's hit us hard, you know, the closure of the inbound international travel, the fairly significant restrictions put in place, not only here in Canada, but many of the countries we fly to around the world, and then the closure of the US border. We've seen, you know, a significant drop in the demand, but amongst all of that, there's been some bright lights at Air Canada. One has been our cargo service. We were quick to pivot and start flying at the very beginning of the crisis in March, PPEs, and so much so that Air Canada was not operating. We got out of the all cargo business a long time ago. But with this crisis, we saw an opportunity, and we converted 7 aircraft to all cargo. So 4 Boeing 777, we removed the seats on the top deck to accommodate cargo, and 3 of our Airbus 330s. And they've been flying the world ever since, with bringing back PPEs to Canada, pharmaceuticals, but also recently queen honeybees to help, the population here in Canada. So we're hopeful when we looked at the importance of the network for trade, for economic development, but also tourism. And tourism is a big part of the economic development and the economy, not only of the province of BC, but of all of Canada. And the next slide, please. And I thought that, some of you, I'm sure, are quite familiar with this, with these numbers, but we cannot put aside tourism as a major economic driver of this country and of this province. The government of Canada, Destination BC as well, they had had great hopes for that sector looking to 2025. We haven't abandoned the work there. We will bring back our network where possible. We are encouraging, we're putting a lot of efforts in talking to governments in terms of making sure that the tourism industry can rebound as quickly as possible. And I'll speak specifically to our strategy to help in that endeavor in a moment. Next slide, please. So our footprint in the country when it comes to the economy in general is there, but specifically in tourism, we flew, and those are numbers from 2018, about 5 million foreign tourists into Canada. And with a number of programs that I'll touch upon later on, and Dave has mentioned a few there, where we're, as an industry, we're very aligned on what needs to be done in terms of moving forward. There are initiatives we were discussing with governments prior to this, and in our views, need to be sped up if we're going to restart this part of the economy as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So what we're doing to look forward, and I like to say, that thankfully we see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's no doubt. What we're not quite sure about right now is how long is that tunnel. It's going to be as long as government restrictions stay in place. There are different government restrictions in place. Some of them, we think, in all honesty, government could tone down the messaging of, stay at home, i.e. don't come here and infect our population. We've seen, sadly, examples of how some people are reacting, not only with the Asian community, but also people with license plates on their cars that are not from BC. It's unacceptable, but I think, some people are maybe, equating what they're hearing from governments to, oh my God, there are strangers in our midst, and this is dangerous for us. We need to take a step back from that messaging, and we need to start progressively, thoughtfully reopening our economy and telling people it's okay, because there are measures in place to make sure that the spread and that curve, stays flattened to the bottom. So next slide, please. So we have a phased approach to recovering the travel demand. And Jeff was absolutely right. I mean, we have in our scheduled flights right now, that's the plan. We don't know if they're going to happen. As I mentioned, we're not going to fly empty planes. So we need to put them back at one point. And to be honest, we've had some interesting reactions for some when we've added flights, Toronto to Kelowna, for example, Toronto to Victoria, where people basically told us, are you guys crazy? You want Ontarians to come here? And so we're almost in a damn if we do, damn if we don't situation right now. But the work that we're doing to reassure people, we think, and looking to the future, and for us, the future is July, August, September, in terms of an intra-Canada tourism demand market. And Jeff mentioned, you know, when we looked at our schedule and our network, we look forward. Typically, the schedule you see on ac.com, 6 months to 6 months, the schedule is published. Other different international destinations will look a year, 2 years ahead, you know, getting government permissions to fly in and all that. Nowadays, it changes every day. And there are, you know, we receive an updated thinking of our network planning group almost every day. So we're in the lockdown now. We're really in the stay at home. We're starting to talk to the provincial marketing organization, a lot of the DMOs as well right now. There's a lot of talk about this hyper-local campaign. We're trying to open it up a little bit as some intra-province, intra-Canada travelers. We know, because now it's allowed, we do fly currently to all the major cities in Canada, but we see that it's mostly urgent personal matters, business travelers that are slowly coming back. We think we hit the bottom probably a week to 2 weeks ago, and we're seeing a little bit of an upswing in demand now. We're light years away from what it was. We still see a lot of no-shows, day off cancellations from people. You know, from a pre-crisis 120 to 130,000 travelers on our network. We're seeing about 5,000 to 6,000 a day in these days. But looking forward, you know, we're going to look at the countrywide opening. We're looking at some marketing ideas with some of our tourism partners. We know that, you know, international travel is a little bit further off, but we're confident that with measures that are being put in place, that also will come back and people will want to travel again. We're hoping it's going to be before 2 years. We're hoping some of those measures might be lifted in a thoughtful, maybe case-by-case approach with different countries, you know, by 2021. Next slide, please. But we know that everything we do to generate demand won't be worth much if people are afraid, and people are afraid to fly. So we've introduced a number of measures. We call it Book and Fly with Confidence. The Air Canada Clean Care Plus is a series of measures that we have taken, that airlines around the world in some form or another have taken to make sure that, you know, when you fly, when you're in the cabin of the aircraft, it is clean, it is safe. The systems that exist make it very safe, as safe to fly as it is to sit in a restaurant or a pub, if people follow the measures of you know, not sneezing openly and coughing openly, not touching your face and washing your hands. We're working very closely with our colleagues at Air Canada Vacation to put together some of those travel packages. So there's discussions happening in different regions of Canada, and they've put in place, you know, a travel protection package just to make sure that, you know, people can be thinking, oh, I'm going to travel in August, but come August, for whatever reason, you know, there's a rebound in the virus and they're afraid. So we're putting measures in place to make sure that people can book. We want to see, you know, the demand. We want to stimulate some demand, but we also want to be cognizant of the fact that as those travel plans get closer and closer, people might change their minds. We did the same thing within Air Canada with some changes to our cancellation policies. Sure, a lot of you have heard and followed the news about the refund issue with Canadian Airlines and the position of the Canada Transportation Agency on this. We've made our, because frankly, a lot of people had tickets that were non-refundable, and the airline passenger protection regulations call on airlines to refund people if it's an event that is within the control of an airline. I mean, I think the CTA has rightfully, in our opinion, obviously, said that the COVID was absolutely not within the control of airlines. So, but nonetheless, we've announced some measures where the credit that we're offering will be good and with no expiry date. It's fully transferable to another person if a person cannot travel. or you can transfer it convert it into Aeroplan miles. So next slide, please. So finally, what we're doing and what we've been doing before and what we will do even more with the Canadian government is we understand, we're quite aware that getting a passenger from Australia, New Zealand, Asia into Canada, and there's been a big push before this crisis to bring travelers to the regions. And some of the measures that we were working on to really help connect those passengers beyond the hub cities was such as one-stop security, where you don't have to go through the airport security again if you're arriving from a country and your final destination is Kelowna or Prince George or Sandspit. So not every country is designated for OSS. So that is, in our view, something that Canadian government should speed up. There's the same thing with international to domestic. So when you arrive, you don't have to pick up your baggage at YVR, for example. You can pick your baggage at the point at your final destination, and that is also a good selling feature in terms of attracting passengers to the regions. And I won't go to the issues that that Dave spoke of, but just to mention that we're, as I said, fully supportive and we're fully aligned with that. So thank you so much. I'll be happy to answer any questions. That was a speed up version of the overview of what's happening for us.
That was fantastic. Yeah, really good information again. The caliber of information has been great this call for sure. We are a little bit over time, but I see a few questions just particularly through the chat, so I'm just going to go straight into those before we wrap up. And one of the questions was, do you see this as the end of spoke and hub and more destination-driven air travel?
Well, the spoke and hub model has been the strategy for Air Canada over the last 10 years. It's been a strategy for airlines around the world. I don't see it's the end of it. Now, how many spokes will we have? That might change. But the success of being able to have flights like a Vancouver Delhi, for example, or a Vancouver Auckland, just the Vancouver market is not sufficient to sustain. We need to be able to connect passengers. So I don't see it as the end of that model.
Okay, and I know, Dave, you chimed in this question through the chat, but I'm going to ask it to see if there's a bit more that the other folks want to go into, or if you want to expand on the answer as well, Dave. But the question was sort of a comment first and then a question, but what do you think of the suggestion that has been floated that we don't want to recover to previous flight numbers for environmental reasons? The argument is that rather than invest in rebuilding the airline industry, we should invest in better communication technology to reduce business flights, car rentals, etc. Could this thinking threaten recovery?
Was that question for Dave, or was it for?
That was just an open question. So David had answered a little bit in the chat, but if he wanted to expand, or Serge, Chad, or Jeff chime in.
Well, for air travel, I can just say this. The issue of the environmental footprint is a very important one that we actually agree with. IATA and the international airlines have taken some measures. The renewal of our fleet, one thing that this crisis has done is it made us forget for a moment the 737 MAX issue. But that's sadly that's a very modern aircraft, the Airbus 220 that we were just starting to bring on board. We're retiring a lot of our old aircraft, speeding it up. So when you look at the footprint, we've made a commitment to the Canadian government, and Canada has made a commitment internationally to reach some targets by 2050, and we're still committed to those targets.
I think the other side to that too, Jeff, here is, airplanes don't just move people. they move goods, they move services, they drive local and regional economies. And you can, I think, from a personal standpoint, I think this is what we're going to see. Yeah, sure, there's commercial office space in lots of cities that are not going to be refilled. But I don't think, business is done on a relationship basis at some level. It doesn't matter what that is. So you need to be face to face with your customers, with your suppliers. I don't think that's going to change, regardless of the amount of technology that's available. So there's some degree of that that's going to stay, and you can do tourism electronically, but do you really want to visit the Okanagan and pretend you're drinking wine by looking at a computer screen? I think, and some of that response is somewhat cynical, but realistically, there will be advances in technology, there will be advances in communication, and there may or may not be less people traveling, but it's not going to go away completely, and I don't think you can swap one for the other. It's going to be a balance in the future.
Okay, thanks for that. Dave, did you have anything to add to that question?
No, other than it's one of the 6 strategic priorities of the BC Aviation Council is our commitment to the environment, and I really feel the industry will rise to the challenge. And also, Serge gave a very good example. As these carriers rebuild, they're going to build with their most efficient hardware. So one positive out of COVID will be a rapid adoption of a more modern fleet.
Okay, and another question mainly pointed towards the Kelowna International Airport. The question is, what steps is Kelowna International Airport taking with the existing airport businesses to retain them? And how are your business development or attraction efforts changing? And how can those efforts be duplicated by smaller airports throughout the province?
It's a bit of a balance for us also in this perspective. I mean, some of it with our tenants is relationship. Some of it is, in place agreed contracts. So there's a bit of a balance in terms of how we can support them and how they can support us, and what we can effectively do. Like we said, everybody that's on the airport, mostly, if you take certainly all the aeronautical revenue that's driven out of the airport is affected by COVID in some form or other. KF Aero, for example, being our biggest tenant, they're completely changing their business model because they're not maintaining airplanes the way they used to maintain airplanes. They're looking at doing cargo conversions as opposed to doing passenger aircraft maintenance. We are limited in some of the things that we can do in terms of the contracts that are already in place, but we are talking to all of our partners, again, almost on a daily basis. I mean, prior to this, I was in a conversation with the rest of the leadership team in terms of what do we do with the car rental companies and what their costs are. But, as I alluded to at the very beginning, we don't have any revenue, so we can't support that necessarily with some kind of funding support. And if we were to release everybody from every contractual obligation that they have as a tenant to us, then we would have absolutely zero revenue, and we can't be in a position, as any business can't be, to start from a zero-based budgeting format. So it's completely a balance. There's no one answer to that question. How we're helping individual types of companies and individual businesses differs. So being able to share that strategy with somebody else is difficult, because it's different at any other airport and any other community. We'd be happy to chat with airports individually and communities individually on what we have done, but it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, I'm afraid.
Right. I suppose really the common denominator, regardless of airport size, community size, or anything else, is the relationships. As you mentioned, that's the key part for keeping your businesses. And, yeah.
Definitely. You know, I mean, we're trying to maintain those relationships as well as maintain the businesses floating above that zero balance sheet. But it's difficult on both sides of the fence.
Yeah. Okay, I'll ask one more question that was put in the chat, and it is definitely for you, Serge. It is, when is Air Canada expecting the return of service to Penticton?
Yeah, I saw that one. So the plan currently is August.
August. Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you, Serge, Chad, Jeff, and Dave. Thank you so much for being part of this call. As I've said, the information you provided here was really informative and I think really helpful for our call participants. So thank you so much again. And also thank you to everyone else for joining us today. Please don't hesitate to reach out to either Ashley or myself if you've got any questions, any ideas, any comments. We're happy to hear from you at any time or just to chat with you. A quick reminder I'll put in again just about that municipal survey. If you can fill that out, it will definitely help us a lot as an association and for BCEDA to move forward. So please take some time to look after yourselves, be safe, and take care. Thanks.
Thank you.